2023 school board meeting to order. Item number 1, public access to meetings. This meeting is open for public attendance. You may also watch the meeting remotely via live stream. Item number 2, meeting opening and roll call. We have roll call and verification of quorum. Carlin, can you please call roll? Yes.
Mr. Robbie.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Mr. Summers.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
Ms. Reno is out ill today. Mr. Kowalski.
Here.
Mr. Campos.
Here.
Ms. Bushman.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. If we could please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, our next item is item number 4, the Mandana Bliss Award. For those who are not aware, the Mandana Bliss Award is a symbol of our deep appreciation for the unwavering commitment and outstanding efforts demonstrated by our staff members for educational excellence in the Stevens Point Area Public School District. It is named in honor of Mandana Hale Bliss, Stevens Point's first teacher and trailblazer, whose exceptional service and dedication continue to inspire us all. We are honoring 2 staff members this month, and so at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Corey.
Sure. Thank you, Jen. We have 2 Mandana Bliss winners this month. First of all, I'd like to say congratulations to Molly Johnson, who is a teacher at Jefferson. And I would like to ask Molly and student Augie Rogaszewski, a 3rd grade student, to come forward. Augie's going to say a few words about Miss Johnson. Why don't you step right into this mic?
Mrs. Johnson makes coming to school fun. She encourages me to do my best every day, and she reminds me I have courage when things get tough. She gave me courage when I had to get my braces. She gave me a nice card and a box of Nerds. Mrs. Johnson is one of the best teachers I have had, and I appreciate all that she does for me. You're the best.
Oh. Say a few words or not?
And Augie, I am blessed and honored to be your 3rd grade teacher. You make every day fun.
So congratulations, Molly. We're going to have you next meeting. We're going to have you start here with Mr. Kowalski and go around, and they're going to congratulate you. So if you go on the inside. Yeah.
Well done.
Great speech.
Thank you.
Nice job, Augie. Good work.
You did a really good job. Great speech.
Well,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for
Thanks so
celebrating your teacher. Thanks for all you do.
Yep.
Now we're going to take a picture before you go back to your seats.
Color coordinated.
It's like they planned it.
On point.
And next, I would like to have Darla Panoski, who is our elementary curriculum and instruction coordinator, come forward. And she is going to say a few words about our next winner, who is Teresa Benz. Congratulations, Teresa.
When the opportunity to nominate someone from Bliss came about, I jumped on the chance to nominate Teresa. She goes above and beyond all aspects of her job. She's meticulous, especially when things are going to be public facing. I have heard time and time again, we cannot have this looking like this if it's going out to the public. Okay. Teresa wears many hats. She's a great team player behind the scenes for summer school, at onboarding, just to name a few that she helps me tremendously. I don't think there's a department here at this building that doesn't go to her for some kind of help or as a backup. All that Teresa does, whether it is for administration or anyone employed in the district, affects students in the community. If you walk by our department, most likely she'll be on the phone with a parent, a community member, a staff member, assisting them with a question or concern that they have. Her number one goal in her job is always as a servant, to be a servant for the community and for our students and staff. So thank you, Teresa.
Congratulations.
Okay. It's up to you if you don't.
Thank you. I take great joy in being able to work here at Bliss, and I work with just incredible people who every day are working hard to do what's best for students and make sure that they have everything that they need. So I am truly blessed to be able to work with such wonderful people, and thank you all for being the forefront to our community and our schools and helping our students to be the best that they can.
Thank you.
Congratulations, thank you. I feel like I should be hugging you instead. I'll hug you tomorrow.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thanks, Teresa.
Can't sit down yet. We gotta take a picture.
Best part of the meeting.
Thank you.
It's always so lovely to start our meetings with those celebrations. So congratulations. Moving on to agenda item 5, public comments. Members of the public may provide comment pertaining only to specific items on the agenda in person or via email. Carlin, did we receive any emailed comments?
We did not.
Thank you. And I see that we did not receive any comments or anyone that wanted to speak in public comment. Is that accurate? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6, we have our Student Senate Representative Report with Matt Frank. Hi, Matt.
Hello. Well, good evening, board members. As we find ourselves between the gap of Thanksgiving and Christmas break, SPASH has been flourishing with success throughout different layers of our school. From the piloting of the new hybrid block schedule, musical, theatrical success, and athletic achievements, SPASH has once again achieved the highest standards in terms of an open, understanding, and a high-achieving environment. To dive into specifics of this, I believe what impressed me most throughout this month was our student body and the patience and openness towards the implication of the hybrid block schedule. Still in the midst of piloting it, I've had many discussions with both students and faculty alike, speaking in high regards to the new schedule. On Wednesday afternoon, Principal Vondorf presented the reasoning behind the block schedule to a group of student leaders, including myself. What I have concluded from the information gathered throughout the first week of the pilot is that I appreciate the reprieve from anxiety of all your classes in one day. Spreading out the schedule allowed me to focus more on the given class period and not feel anxious about what awaits in the next class period. I also feel as though the addition of Panther clubs and activity time is useful for scheduling purpose with a variety of clubs I am involved in. It has also provided opportunities to students with low club participation rates to go and explore new clubs and communities throughout the school. Overall, the piloting of the block schedule has been a convenient alternative to the student body of SPASH, as we look forward to new ideas that benefit our education and well-being. Over the weekend, theater group Playhouse Theater hosted their presentation of Frozen in the SPASH auditorium. The success of this play contained many contributions from SPASH students interested in drama. Following the musical, the SPASH Music Department has an extended sequence of events this following weeks. This Tuesday, our choir performs at 7:30 in the auditorium, followed by our orchestra concert on Thursday night. This event is also followed by the holiday band concert on the following Tuesday night. I hope you and many others in the community are able to attend and enjoy the talented musicians of SPASH in this festive time of year. With addition to the success of our creative arts programs, winter athletics are now in full swing. Our boys cross country team competed at the national level at Nike Cross Nationals in Portland, Oregon, taking 16th among the best teams in the nation. This comes as a success with qualifying for this competition in 2019, 2020, and now 2 years in a row in 2023. New boys head swim coach Phil Potter has led the boys swim team to remain undefeated within the conference, following success from outside of conference competitions. Spash Hockey has also continued their string of achievements, tying number 1 ranked team in the state, Notre Dame Academy, last week Saturday at the Willett Ice Arena. Now both boys and girls basketball teams have bounced into the competitive ranks around the state. Both programs' records are a testament towards their hard work and dedication throughout this winter. Touching on the community aspect of SPASH, the dual math and tech ed class, geometry and construction, created a mini golf course that follows the ADA requirements over the last few weeks. The course is open to students this Wednesday, and with a new addition this year is that the mini golf course will be open to the community December 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. Also, another achievement of SPASH is that Kylie Kress, who is a special education teacher at SPASH, was selected as the Teacher of the Month for Cheryl Tires/Hot 96.7 by one of her students. She is now a nominee for the Teacher of the Year award to be selected at the end of the school year. Finally, SPASH students supported the Boston School Forest Cold Plunge to contribute to the funding of Boston School Forest. Many of my friends said that it was a success and plan on attending next year. Before I conclude this briefing, I quickly wanted to thank the board for the continued efforts to provide a higher quality of education throughout the functioning of this hybrid block schedule. I appreciate your attentiveness and diligence in listening to the speech, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Matt. You did
you,
such a
Matt.
nice job.
Yeah.
Appreciate the comprehensive report. Okay, moving on to the next item, we have, where am I here? Sarah, the communication report with Sarah O'Donnell.
Hello. Included in your packets, you'll find the November communication report. Just a few things I want to quickly touch on for you. Our November focus, we launched an Elevating Excellence video series, which has been well received so far, and I've had a really good time kind of getting out into schools a little bit more and getting to talk to students more about their experiences in classrooms. So looking forward to continuing that series. Also had a chance just to get out there and take some more photos, which is nice. I'm enjoying this calm before the storm a little bit. So that has been wonderful. One thing I will note is we are going to pause the release of school websites. Originally, we had planned on releasing those in January. Given some migration timeline, just complications with the company that we're using and me looking at my capacity kind of moving ahead, I really want to make sure that we are focused on some other communication plans, things that we have in the works, so we will likely postpone that until end of the school year. So we'll still get them launched before the end of the school year, just likely not in January. A few other things to touch on. Website performance, we had over 23,000 unique visitors throughout the month, which is very much in line with where we would expect that to be, so no surprises there. Social media performance, we did see a decrease in both impressions and engagement across Facebook and Instagram channels. I need to do a little bit more looking into why that was. Our consistency was the same, our types of content was the same. We had some very, very large pieces of impressions the previous month, so I don't think it's a decrease in like what we would expect to see. I think it's just reflective of what we saw in October was just really, really high, specifically with engagements. We had a couple coaches inducted into Halls of Fame, and we had still some pieces being posted about the cross-country students, so it's concerning. We'll take another look, but I don't think it's an overall indication of performance. E-newsletters continue to perform really well, both internally and externally, with average click-through rates of 34% and 7%. Media relations continue to stay about where we would expect to see them. We got some really fun coverage last month with the board's approval to harvest the Christmas tree from Spash to put that downtown as the downtown holiday tree. So that was really fun to see, just our ability to kind of get involved in those festivities. Also, thank you to those of you who were able to be at the holiday parade. I know that was a really fun event, and students just really love to be able to see their mascots, and it's I like to see the band too. It's just really nice to have everybody there together. The breakdown on focus of allocation time, I think, is next. And here we just see, where my time was spent outside of specifically, communication projects, referendum, obviously, superintendent, obviously, most of that work being in strategy planning, copywriting, community relations, a very small amount of crisis comm, and content creation. And then looking ahead to December, just continuing to provide that comprehensive communications and project management support to those who need it here in the building and externally as well throughout our buildings, creating a compelling, those compelling stories and content pieces, continuing to provide effective communications support to other departments, and then continuing the progress on the creation of those new websites. So while like I said, we'll be delaying that launch of those new sites. We'll continue to work on those in the background to make sure that everything is ready to go. The other piece I will be adding for you next month will be related to referendum communication. We'll just highlight that really specifically, assuming that the board, or should the board, move forward with that tonight. So while that isn't specifically in here tonight, I just wanted to let you know that would be our plan.
Any questions for Sarah? Thank you for all your work, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah.
All right, moving on to the superintendent's report with Corey.
Sure, just a few things to note. We are very appreciative of the support the community continues to give us in our schools. Most recently, Mary Hesh gave a donation of $10,000 to our music program for students who may not be able to afford instruments. So thank you to Mary. She worked through the Community Foundation to make sure that that was taken care of. She gave a very, very inspirational story to students about giving back to the community and how important it is to do that. So thank you to Mary. To date, our Money for Meals program to support families that have negative lunch account balances has reached a total of $10,683. The Junior Women's Club gave a donation for family community events that encourage positive family connections. And then First State Bank, this is the 7th year in a row that they've done a challenge within the bank, and they've given a donation back to our schools to help students. So thank you to the community for all of their support. Polar Pond Plunge was Saturday. Carla Lockman and her staff deserve a huge kudos. It was a great event. The weather cooperated, and thanks to all the staff members and board members that jumped. We've had a group of student athletes compete in the State Special Olympics bowling competition, so congratulations to those students. Important to note that winter break is December 25th through January 1st, and school will resume again on January 2nd. Board candidacy update, December 22nd is the date if incumbents are not going to run again, and they need to make sure that they file that documentation with the business office by 5 o'clock on the 22nd. And then if people are out there and are interested in being put on the ballot, they need to fill out paperwork by January 2nd at 5 o'clock. And lastly, I have just one legislative update, and I'm not sure if Ted, or Alex do, but to note, the governor just recently signed into law legislation that says, beginning with the graduating class of 2028, they are requiring students to complete at least a half a credit of personal financial literacy. We are in compliance with this already. We already require a half a credit. So while it's new legislation, we're set. So that's good news. Anything else from Alex, G, or Ted? Okay.
The only thing was, it doesn't affect us directly. The fight between the universities and the legislature is ongoing. They're going back and forth, and nobody knows what's going to happen with that as far as the money that they want to. They what?
I think they settled that today.
Did they? I didn't see it today.
Then it had to be since like 3 o'clock.
It was.
Really?
It was
So they've
late
done
this
something
afternoon.
about it? Okay.
More to come on that?
Any
I think
idea,
so.
any
I just saw that Katrina
specifics?
had
Okay.
posted something.
All right.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Moving on to agenda item 7, the consent agenda. This includes the minutes of the prior school board meeting from November 13th, 2023, minutes of the special school board meeting on December 4th, 2023, the approval of schedule of monthly bills and employment recommendations. I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the November 13th, 2023 board meeting as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Miguel, seconded by Alex. Okay. Carlin, can you please call roll, do the schedule of monthly bills?
Mr. Campos.
Yes.
Mr. Summers.
Yes.
Mr. Pope.
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski.
Yes.
Ms. Portson.
Yes.
Mr. Robbie.
Yes.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes.
And motion carries.
Thank you, Carlin. Moving on to agenda item 8, business services. Judy is out ill, so I'm going to hand it off to Corey.
Sure. I'm going to ask Tom to come forward and talk about 8B.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, borrow my hat, man.
I'm getting to like cookies and milk a lot more, and I don't require as much padding anymore for the suit of Santa, but seriously, on the roof bid for PJ's, this is a project that was contained within the 10-year plan that you folks reviewed and approved before. The bid went out, Class 1 notice and bids to vendors. We received 3 bids out of the 4 vendors that were contacted. You have that material in your background. It came in under budget, about $15,000 under budget, so we were very happy about that. And the roofing contractor there is one who's done a considerable amount of work for us and has done very well. So it turned out quite good, and we'd recommend approval of Mauer Roofing to do the project as indicated for $914,900.
Just one question. Do you have the low bid is about 100,000 lower than the next bid. Do we have any sense of why?
It's a Christmas miracle.
Okay.
Sometimes we just go with the grace that's given us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Tom?
Move for approval. Now second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
The next item, the district school safety and security report. This is an item that you see every year in December. It's a requirement that we inform you, and then we send to the Office of School Safety by January 1st, the report. Chris Budzinski has been managing this requirement. All buildings have complied. It's an informational item only, but Chris is here in the event you have questions. So the report is attached. It includes the dates that all of those drills took place, who was involved, and a short description of each drill. Any questions?
I guess just anything out of norm. I mean, I read through the report, but things.
No, they go better and better every year, which is good, but it's still tumbling and a challenge, I think, for the adults. The kids are amazing to see. There's always some different scenario that happens each year, and how their principals react to it is just beautiful to see. It's just like, wow, that goes well. So yeah, nothing out of the ordinary. It's nice having I think the local law enforcement really is on site on all of them. For one, they couldn't make it, and all of a sudden 4 different officers showed up. And wow, this is great. So it just really comes together.
We've been in collaboration with local police and emergency responders, I would say, more in the last year than we have in the past, and that's good. They're doing more trainings in our buildings. Our staff are involved in those trainings, so I think things are really progressing nicely, and we've been getting good support.
I did have one question. When I'm looking at the SPASH one compared to the elementary schools, it doesn't talk about, so some of the other schools talked about students in the hallway. Do we not have any? It said there were, it went well for the SPASH one, but it didn't have any areas of improvement noted. Everything went swimmingly at SPASH.
Chris, can you come up to the mic, please? Thank you.
Yeah, the principals write those up and they go through, their observations and stuff. But it just, when they announce that drill, by the time you get to spots, it is empty, and you're just like, where'd everybody go?
So, yeah, they really have, since the rekey this year, they made it a lot easier, and just the training they've done over the course of the year since, was that December of last year? Just people know where they're going. They've spent a lot of time doing that.
Okay, just because I know that sometimes announcements aren't heard necessarily throughout the building.
Right.
So
Correct.
I know that was noted at Ben or PJ's that they didn't have announcements, so. And that was fixed as well, the announcement issue?
Yes, they've been working on some of the stuff. They've added speakers, and then they've done some programming on phones and some of the quiet spots that they can do.
Okay.
I just had a concern about getting into schools. I've been into and out of lots of schools, and it varies. We have a set procedure at all our schools, like you go through the first door and you have to hit the button before you can be let into the next.
Correct. Most schools are locked. There are some windows where they'll allow students in at the elementaries where they have 15-minute, as long as there's an adult there to essentially observe that door should someone else try to get in. But other than that, I did a tour of every building. I touched every outside door in since October. I found one that opened, but not because it was unlocked. It just happened to be there was something stuck on it, so a work order's put in. But all our doors are locked when students are in session. You're not going to get in. You'll have to go to that front, push the little video camera, talk to the office, and then they'll make determinations based on what to allow you in.
Sometimes I'm concerned, like, what can you see through that little camera? Like, you hit the button, and I look at it, and I think, are they looking at me? Because a lot of times they won't say anything. They'll just hit a buzzer to open it.
Right.
Are they really looking at me? Are they?
It's kind of a fisheye lens, so it sees a lot more than you think as part of the body. But yeah, they're just looking to see, if either somebody recognizes or, looking for the stuff what's different about that. It's kind of what law enforcement says is look for the different things, the different mannerisms of people is probably what's going to send that signal.
There's also the concern of if you're going through and somebody is following you, that to be
correct,
to be nice, you would hold the door for them, but we want to make sure we don't do that. That we understand that we close the door and let the next person get their access in.
Correct. They call it tailgating, and it's the police. And it's unbelievable. We're trained from kids. Hey, open the door for your neighbor. That's what we do. And remember the Seinfeld where it's like, you're really my neighbor? They kept pulling the door shut, wouldn't let them in. Yeah, telling people you gotta make sure someone is supposed to be there. They go through it over, and it's hard, but you got to do it. And we see improvements every year. 3 years ago, I don't think I'd have found a lot more doors open. Some I was reaching, going, it's gonna open. It didn't open, yay! So, but no, people have really taken ownership and said, no,
We
gotta
tell
lock it.
parents and everything to watch for that.
Yep.
Yes.
And people watching each other, be observant of what's happening around you. Is our number one defense is watching around. See something out of the ordinary, ask. Washington Elementary, I'll give them the best kudos ever. Walked in, and I get the, hey! I'm like, well, who's hollering at me? But there's only one male teacher there at the time. So there's another male in the building. Who is that? And I turn around, they're like, oh, it's you. So they're doing it.
That's awesome. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, agenda item 10, educational services. We have 10A, the committee report, the educational services committee report with Chief.
We didn't have a meeting, so there would be nothing to report on those lines.
Correct. And so I think we were going to still talk about calendar recommendations.
Correct. Yep. So we do have a calendar recommendation for 24-25 that has been, that's available in your packet, and I will get this to come up here as soon as it lets me choose it. Just as a little bit of a lead-in, just be aware that in the development of the calendar for the 24-25 academic year, we did engage a committee of 12 people that represented stakeholder groups that included certified staff, administration, and classified staff members. Those groups came together on 2 different occasions. One significant change from the calendar that we've lived for the last several years is the addition of a professional learning day in September. The committee felt very strongly about having a professional development day prior to the end of October. They felt like that was a really long time to wait. And we also have gotten into a cadence of reviewing data more consistently as part of continuous improvement planning. So they felt strongly about the ability to be able to engage in that planning and goal setting process earlier rather than waiting until the end of October. So we were able to accommodate that change. I think the one other thing that I'd like to point out in terms of this calendar is Teresa Bentz, who we met earlier as a recipient of the Mandana Bliss Award, worked really hard to develop a new template, which has the calendar and all of the information on one page. And we also added those additional QR codes on the bottom of the calendar that links you to more specific information if indeed that happens to be what you're looking for. So those were the most significant changes. We do meet the number of required instructional hours at all levels for each of our respective sites, and we were able also to include on this calendar the specific start and end times for each of our buildings. So it's important to note as well in the approval process of this calendar that the calendar does include 2 inclement weather days, both at elementary and at secondary levels. So built in to this calendar and the 193 contract days that we have for staff, the 2 inclement weather days that we have the ability to leverage if there is a need. So we're looking for a motion to approve the 24-25 calendar unless there are questions.
I just had one question. I noticed when I looked at it that there was an asterisk regarding spring break about align with UWSP may change. So is that something that, I guess, just to point out that may change in the calendar depending on?
Correct.
Okay.
UWSP spring break has historically, at least for the last 7 years, been the 3rd week of March. So I don't anticipate a change. I feel pretty confident bringing this forward saying there won't be a change, but potentially if they would move it to the 2nd week or the 4th week, we would make that adjustment as well. So good. Thanks for pointing that out, Meg.
Yeah, nice call out. And I just have to say, as a parent, I really appreciate this at a glance and the QR codes and even just the school hours starting and dismissal time, so helpful.
Agree.
So I just received a request and feedback of that this week, and so, yes, thank
good.
you.
Well, I'm glad I delivered.
She's watching. We met your need. All right, so looking for a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
All right, we're
I
going to
have-
move on to the school district report card overview.
Correct, and I am going to move over to the podium so I don't have to crank my neck the whole time I walk through the slides here. As you know, the Department of Public Instruction for the state of Wisconsin released the school accountability report cards on November 14th. So based on that release, we're going to walk you through an overview of sort of how we arrive at the overall district and school scores on the accountability report cards. We'll give you a little bit of information in terms of whether or not the schools by building demonstrated an increase or a decrease from the year prior. And I'd ask at this point for you to reserve any questions that you might have as we make our way through the district level performance levels and the building performance levels, and we'll be happy to answer those for you at the end of the presentation. So in alignment with our district pillars and strategic objectives, we use this data primarily to inform changes that may need to occur for student engagement, growth, mental health, wellness, and creating inclusive environments focused on the development of the whole child, as well as fostering an inclusive partnerships to enhance learning and engagement opportunities that create a strong sense of belonging in our district and in all of our district buildings. The state accountability system each year issues an accountability report card to all districts and to all buildings within each of those respective districts. School report cards are designed to inform schools, districts, and parents in the community of how schools and how districts are performing. The school report cards are intended to help schools and districts use this data to focus student readiness and learning. And they also serve as a great support for us here locally in the Stevens Point School District to generate the continuous improvement plans, which you'll hear both myself and Jeff reference on several occasions throughout the presentation tonight. The accountability report card scores are arrived at based on 4 criteria. There is an analysis of overall student achievement. In other words, the percentage of students that are scoring advanced or proficient on the areas that are assessed at each respective grade level. There's also a value-added look at each of the students based on the amount of growth that they experienced in the areas that they're assessed on each year. Targeted group outcomes examines outcomes for students with the lowest test scores, so it actually looks at students who are in the lowest 25%, who are scoring in that lowest quartile, if you will, both for the building and also by district. So we have, in our school improvement and continuous improvement planning efforts, become much more intentional about identifying who those students are in those targeted groups, both for our district as a whole, but also by buildings. And you'll hear a little bit more about that when we talk about the work that's happening at some of our specific buildings. Student engagement indicators that are also included as part of the overall accountability score include absenteeism and dropout rate. So we have not received a reduction in overall score at any of our buildings or as a district for either of these two engagement indicators, but they are areas that we certainly are mindful of as we're doing data analysis both at the district level and at the building level to ensure that we're staying above that 84% for absenteeism rate. And I just, as a frame of reference for all of you, most of our buildings in the district are well above 90% for absentee rates, so we're not anywhere near being concerned in this particular area. So I would certainly identify this as an area of strength for us as a district overall. The overall accountability score is categorized into these areas based on these ranges or score ranges. So you can be categorized as either significantly exceeding expectations, meeting few, or failing to meet expectations. The alternate accountability is designated for schools that fall into any of these three criteria. So schools that have fewer than 20 students that are considered FAY or full academic year students. Schools without tested grades. So if you are a school that does not service kids above third grade, you would not receive you would receive an alternate accountability score, as well as schools that are exclusively serving at-risk students. The alternate accountability is categorized, it's based on scoring and based on performance in reading and in math, and it looks at whether or not the system or the building is preparing students to be on track for success or on track for graduation. So the ratings are either considered satisfactory progress or needs improvement. I'm happy to report that the buildings that we have here in the district that are evaluated based on the alternate accountability criteria are both categorized as making satisfactory progress. A couple of highlights before we take a closer look at the individual scores. We did a couple of celebrations. The district student achievement scores exceed the state average by 1.9 points in ELA and 1.5 points in math. So as we look at some areas that we're still working on improving, I think it's important to have that frame of reference. There's obviously growth that we can continue to make, and there's lots of room for growth, but we also continue to exceed the state average in overall achievement in those two areas that are tested. 7 schools increased their overall score. Most notably, Jefferson increased by 1.1 overall points, Bannock by 0.6, and McKinley by 1.9 points. A couple of additional highlights just to provide an overview. We don't have any schools currently that are categorized as significantly exceeding expectations, but we do have one school, Bannock Elementary, that's very close to significantly exceeding expectations. We have 5 schools that exceed expectations, 6 schools, including the district, that are categorized as meeting expectations, and we have 2 schools that are categorized as meeting few expectations. It's important to note here at this point in the presentation, closing achievement gaps and addressing school growth are a focus that we have been intentional about including in our continuous improvement planning process, both last year and continues to be an intentional focus this year. Before we jump into this year's scores, I wanted to give just a little bit of a look back. I know that these are not necessarily committed to long-term memory for anyone, but district accountability scores for the last 5 years, beginning in 2016-2017, we were exceeding expectations at 74.7 as an overall score, down to 72.1 in 17-18, down to 72 in 18-19, down to 66.8. In 2021, there was not an accountability score given to districts or to buildings in 2019-2020. And then in 21-22, 65.5, and our score as an overall district this year is 63.7. So if we take a look at our trend data over the last 6 years, we see a downward trend. So clearly there is some work to interrupt some of those patterns of performance that are emerging, and that has occurred most notably at 2 schools that are still categorized as meeting few expectations, at our senior high school and at Plover Whiting Elementary. And Jeff and I will talk a little bit more about those 2 buildings specifically and the contributions that their score have made to our overall designation. So Bannock Elementary is scoring at 80.2. And I just want to give you a frame of reference here in terms of where that was in the year prior. So this is up from 79.6 in 2022, and that is up from 73.4 in 2020-2021. Significant progress in that building. Jefferson Elementary, 78.8, categorized as exceeding expectations. This is up from 77.8 in 2022. And 70.9 in 2021. Nice progress at Jefferson as well. Kennedy Elementary is categorized as exceeding expectations at 71.9. This is down slightly from 73.0 in 2022 and 71.3 in 2021. Madison overall score is also categorized as exceeding expectations at 70.1. This is down from 71 in 2022, just slightly, 0.9, and 69.7 is where they were in 2020-2021. McDill Elementary categorized as meeting expectations at 68.3. This is down slightly from 73.5 the year prior and 74.7 in 2021. McKinley Elementary categorized as exceeding expectations. A lot of great work happening at McKinley. This is up from 71.4 the year prior in 22 and 79.6 in 2021. So not quite back to where they were in 2021, but certainly heading in the right direction. Plover Whiting Elementary categorized as meeting few expectations at 56.8. This is down from 60.5 in 2022 and down from 73.0 in 2021. So a downward trend that we're seeing at Plover Whiting that clearly we're working diligently to address. Roosevelt Elementary is down also at 66.9, meeting expectations. They were at 70.1 in 2022, and they were at 73.8 in 2021. So seeing some downward trending there as well, that the staff and Ms. Snyder-Chase are working to intentionally address. Washington Elementary categorized as meeting expectations at 69.6. This is down fairly significantly from 76.4 in 2022 and 73.0 in 2021. A significant drop at Washington that we're certainly aware of and working to address as part of the continuous improvement planning process. And now I'll pass it up to Jeff.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome.
All right, so we have our secondary sites. Start with, we have Ben Franklin Junior High School. As it says up there, we're at 65.5 this year. This is down slightly from last year. We're at 66.6, and in 2021 we were at 70. PJ Jacobs, this is at 65.1 this year. Last year at 67.8 and 71.3 in 2021. As Chris mentioned before, if people have questions at the end, we'll come back to each one of the schools. Pods, we have 63.6 this year. This is down just slightly from last year. They were at 64.1, and they were at 57.1 in 2021. I know here Dan's been doing a lot of work with his staff around literacy, and this year really trying to focus in on mathematics, which has been a focal area at Pods. As Chris mentioned earlier, CFC, or Charles Fernandez, is on the alternative measurement scale. So this is currently getting a satisfactory progress rating, and it's had the same rating for the past 3 years. This is the same at the JDC. And finally, as Chris mentioned, for SPASH, we have a score this year of 51.8. Last year, the score was 57.3, and in 2021, that was 57.0. I know at SPASH, I've been talking to Principal Vollendorf a lot about addressing some of the concerns that we've been having in some of the work, and I'm happy to speak to those more if anyone has questions. This part with our closing remarks, I think this is important. We had the same discussion out in Colorado. The report card is very important, and Chris and I take it extremely seriously. I know for myself, I have an hour meeting with every one of my principals diving into their report cards, and we really want to look at all of our data points, and this is one of them. But it's one piece. I got a chance to talk to Corey this morning. SPASH actually had a bunch of students who took the PSAT. Now, that's a voluntary test. But we had 73% of our students in there meet both benchmarks, and we significantly beat the national average and the state average for our students that elected to take that. When we look at our year-to-year, that result can vary. The thing right now, Chris and I have been talking to our principals on, is the significance we're seeing within our downward trends, especially as we look with our different subgroups, and really working to make sure we're supporting all the students and all of our schools. And then our staff. We have absolutely phenomenal staff that's in front of our students each and every day working so hard. I got to be at SPASH. I didn't get to watch it. But they're working to put on frozen performances. They are working hard academically to do well in their coursework. And I think that's really important for us always to remember is how hard that group is working to support our students. So we wanted to be able to open it up for any questions that anyone has.
Just if there's some way that, I know for me as a board member, I'm assuming the others, I think it would be helpful for us to have that trend data for each school. So if we could maybe get that emailed out to us, just to look
You
at
mean the 3-year look back?
the 3-year look back for the schools. I think that might be good information for the board to have.
Nice visual. Yeah, I agree. Dennis?
I have just a general concern regarding the downward trends of some of our schools, and also the fact that we have schools that are not meeting expectation. Do you think about somewhere between here and the end of the year, we can have some kind of update from administration regarding not specifically what they're doing, but just a general idea of what steps we're taking in order to address that? Because those are very concerning, and especially the steep drop off. That's really unusual. So, and I know you don't have answers to what happened. I know that the key is now, what are we going to do about it? And I just think maybe a little bit to the board in terms of what steps those schools are taking to address that, just as a way of insight. Is that possible?
Absolutely. Yes, we could absolutely provide an overview of some of the steps and some of the goals that have been created at individual buildings. I think maybe a timely window for that update would either be at mid-year or at the end of the year in May, when buildings have administered the 3rd universal screener for both ELA and math, to see the growth that's occurred from fall up until spring. And we could sort of align that with what building principals and teams back at buildings have, or how they've used that data to develop some goals and action steps that support those goals. So we certainly could share that information.
And the only other thing is, overall, we know that during the last 3 years, there's been a lot of decline in scholars' academic growth in general. And I know that in the future, our district hopes to look at any kind of staffing that we might be able to do in terms of intervention, et cetera, in order to address some of that. But this data points out that there's certainly a strong need for some intervention for a wide swath of our scholars, because they are certainly behind in their skills for whatever reason, and some of it might be obviously because of the unusual circumstances over the last 3 or 4 years.
So, and just to piggyback off that, what surprises me is, yes, there have been unusual circumstances, but when you look at the steep drop-off in some of these buildings from 22 to 23, do you have any preliminary insights? Were those surprises to you?
In some buildings, yes, there were surprises to me. So I think that the one thing that I've really been encouraged by in those buildings is when we start to peel back the data, and as Jeff indicated, there is a very deep dive with building leaders and with leadership teams to be able to look at why is this the end result. I'm pleased to report that in all of those instances, students still are demonstrating fairly significant growth. We're not quite hitting the mark in terms of achievement, so we're not quite hitting those proficiency cut scores quite yet, but students are making fairly significant growth from year to year when they're taking the assessment. So that's encouraging, from a systems perspective to be able to say we're moving in the right direction. But I think, in terms of the goals that buildings have developed, I think one thing that the board should be aware of and the community should be aware of is we have a shift in demographic in our district, and I think that as our population of students that are considered second language learners, and as our population of students that are identified with a disability continues to grow, we're going to have to shift our universal instruction to be able to accommodate the needs of those populations of students before we're going to see, I think, a shift in the number of students or the percentage of students that we're getting to those proficiency scores that are considered proficient or advanced. Because that's really where we're seeing the greatest, decrease or underperformance.
In the buildings that have a greater, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry, Barb?
So,
Or Meg,
but
sorry.
Barb can go first, I think you had to. Okay, so, so Spash is a big school, and it's our high school, and, it's the numbers, and I recognize with these test scores that a test score in a particular area can really impact that overall test score. So again, I had just pulled that data and really was pulling it more for comparatively. How does SPASH compare with others? Because again, we're seeing scholars around the state struggling as a result. But the numbers with growth, and in particular the target group, with SPASH, at least suggested to me, those target areas and what may really have impacted that score. So my assumption is you guys already are on it and looking at that, but clearly that's an area where comparatively, and again, especially that target group are the students who are, as you said, we're trying to do a better job of identifying them so that we can provide them with support. So I guess I'm just throwing that out as food for thought.
Yeah, and I think, the DPI has been fairly responsive in terms of creating some systems to support districts in sort of peeling back that data. They've recently added a tool to WiseDash, which is a platform that we leverage quite consistently as building leaders and as district leaders to be able to identify students by name that fall into that target group. And so now we're able to look at those students specifically and have very detailed conversations about the support systems that we have in place for those groups of students and also individual students when that's necessary. So I applaud the DPI for their responsiveness in terms of getting those supports out to districts.
The other thing we've been working on, and Dennis, this is kind of an answer to yours and Meg's question, is all of the secondary sites are working on laying out and coordinating with me to identify the professional development work that we're doing in these different areas. So one of the pieces that I think is really important is we want to make sure that all of our students are getting exposure to these types of question sets in multiple classes.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the resources we have, and we actually expanded it down to 9th grade, is called Methodize. So this is a tool students have access to for free that has 2 practice tests built in. We've had that for a while, but this year we're making a concerted effort to sit down with groups of teachers and say, okay, when are students seeing this in your classroom? Right? Because we can't have not every kid's going to take that practice test on their own. We want that available to all, but we want to build this in the classroom so that teachers can scaffold that support to make sure that every student we have can be successful when they go and take these types of tests, whether it's pre-ACT, ACT, or Wisconsin Forward. That's something that's going on at all the sites this year, and that has not been done in the past.
Jeff, have you communicated that offering to parents so parents are aware that this is an offering, they can talk about it with their students?
I'm working with Sarah right now, Jen, on drafting up a communication with information about the support offerings that are there, because we just got confirmation that we're going to have a summer offering. That's going to be a pilot this year.
Okay.
That will leverage it as well. And then there's going to be a boost program that John's going to offer in February. So I've been working with Sarah already, drafting up a communication that'll go out. That'll also include information to parents about why this is important, because one of the fights we're having at the secondary level is students are hearing, well, you don't have to take the ACT.
Mm-hmm.
So the old piece that really was the pull, right? You had to take it to get into college, isn't necessarily there now. But there's really good reasons we want our parents to know that it's important that students perform their best. whether or not it's for that or they're going into the military. That prep supports you and gets you ready for the ASVAB test as well. So we're working on drafting that communication. We're also partnering with Mid-State, and we've reached out to UWSP as well, so that we can kind of approach that from every angle, so that parents are getting that information in addition to the resource.
Thank you.
And I also want to just point out that, you know, we're not creating an environment where we're just replicating the assessment experience, though we know that there's great value in doing that. I think the other push really is to ensure that all of the instruction that we're providing in the classroom setting is aligned with the most current iteration of curriculum standards across disciplines. So I think that shift also needs to happen at the same time that we're providing students with additional opportunities to engage in that assessment experience that they encounter when they take the pre-ACT, the ACT, or the forward exam.
Barb?
I'm concerned about the Plover schools. Our population growth has been out there, and both of those schools are stuffed. Have we discussed more staffing out there? I mean, you can give them all the professional development, but if they've got 28 kids in their room and one person, you can't meet the needs of all those kids. So have you talked that at all? I mean, I know money is an issue.
Right.
Along with Barb, sorry to interject, but this may be somewhat relevant as you talk to this, is as I'm looking at this, are you comparing the schools that are doing better or trending less lower to the other schools that are trending higher or not trending faster lower? It sort of goes along with what you're saying. If the Plover schools are showing significant losses, why are they, but these schools are not? Data's great, but if there's schools over here doing this, they're all taking all these standardized tests, etc., there's probably data that you're never going to get. There's other things to be assessed, and whether that's something you can talk about in a board, I don't really know, but there's probably other stuff going on. So are you looking at those things? And because of, that makes me wonder, why is this school doing better than these schools? You may not come up and it may not be in data.
Right, and I think to Jeff's point, as we concluded the presentation, you know, the school report card is one metric. So certainly there are other metrics that we're looking at when we're evaluating the amount of progress one building is or is not making. Staffing is certainly one of them. So as we do that comprehensive staffing process every spring, you know, I can share that, you know, they would have the same level of resources that other buildings would have. Now, in some of those buildings, particularly Roosevelt and Plover Whiting, they may have some larger class sizes, but, you know, I think we have buildings in other across the district that also have class sizes that are about that size. But certainly staffing plays a role. I think the one area that we've identified as a district we continue to underperform in that emerges as a concern every year when we look at the data is ELA. So how are we staffing in that particular area, as well as becoming more I think, consistent across the about the interventions that we're providing for students with identified skill deficiencies. I think that's a real opportunity for growth. It's important to share here, I think, that we are gearing up for a comprehensive vetting process to select a new K-6 English Language Arts resource in the upcoming year. And I think when we can sort of level the playing field across buildings to be able to say we're all being delivered a guaranteed and viable curriculum from this resource, we also eliminate some of the variables that make our buildings so different, because they are different right now, right? And they do have access to different resources. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes, we are looking at that. Yes, and we certainly are evaluating, you know, more metrics than just what's reflected here on the school report card.
Alex?
A few questions. One, looking at SPASH's numbers at 51.8, do we have too many offerings that are meeting too many different, for instance, a math one where we're doing more construction and it's meeting a math requirement rather than the math that's being requested on an assessment? Or, you know, the growth, we see different types of growth with, you know, the career readiness, perhaps, versus academic. Are we offering too many options? And I know this is something important to the district. I understand that. Are we offering too many options that are meeting those requirements, while at the same time perhaps not serving our district as well as what they could?
So that's a great question, Alex, and it's one of the things we're working on. So at a secondary level in all classes,
we're actually working through right now identifying the essential standards and then the learning targets in each one of those classes. And the idea is, after we've done those classes, being able to sit down and look at our program offerings to see where we might have some of those areas where we might have crossover, or if we have classes where we do actually legitimately have to ask that. Is this class providing the depth that we need? And then does that mean we need to make an adjustment to increasing the rigor of the class or making some other types of adjustments? But I think especially with having those learning targets and the alignment to standards is really important. And that's work that hasn't been done at the secondary level for quite a while. So all of the groups have been doing that. We've done PD at every one of the sites, and that's what they're going through right now, is identifying and looking at the breakdown. I worked with science on it last year, but we're doing that in all of our contents, including electives, to have some of those conversations.
Alex, it's a great question. As we're doing our program review district-wide, that's one of the questions that we raised. You know, when are students being exposed to skills, and are they getting the skills that they need prior to taking the test? And do all courses that count for that credit teach the skills that students need? So that's taking some time to really dig into. But we asked that question probably in our first or second meeting.
So this is a terrible answer to that question, Alex, but the answer is maybe.
And from a timing perspective, like when will we hear the findings from that work?
So they should have their essential standards and learning targets. The target was, and it's been consistent now for 2 years, the end of this year, for all of the core classes within an area. We did give some grades for teachers because there are some teachers that have 3 preps, and if any of you have done that, it's a lot of work. So if we have that, we have to give that grace. But what we told each department was, especially like English 10, you have to, right? Bio, chem, those types of courses, they have to have those done. And then if there's a few of those offshoots, that's where they'll work with myself or with Chris in the summer, and we'll look at finding them some PD time to finish those pieces off. But that's what we're working on. And then putting all of those in the shared drive, so if we get a new hire, our new hires will also have access to that information.
And in terms of the program review, Jen, that's happening kind of at a district level or sort of the next level out from that. You know, we're concluding the evaluation of, I think, our 16th or 17th program as part of that process. So we recognize some of the information that we're collecting now will really inform shifts or changes to the system, you know, potentially long-term, right? Because some of those shifts would be significant. Because we may identify, you know, some courses within a program that are duplicative. In other words, they're addressing the same standards. But until we've done the work of identifying what essential standards are taught in each of the courses, it's difficult to be able to do that crosswalk. So we realize there's a next step to this program evaluation process that we're currently engaged in.
Miguel?
I don't know if you have this answer, but I'm just curious. Do you know, when I'm looking at this kind of downward trend here over the past several years, do we know, by comparison to surrounding districts, if they're seeing the same kind of trend?
You know, Miguel, I guess I wouldn't know. I do know that kind of regionally, I think that districts saw a slight decrease, similar to what we saw in the past year. Now, whether or not that has been a decrease that's tracked over the last 5 or 6 years, I don't have the answer to that. Yeah, I'd have to go and look at each of those districts individually.
G?
I did look up those scores for you, not from the last few years, but just from this year. We're 10.2 points lower than the next highest score as far as high schools go. As far as high schools go. To me, this is alarming, and I'm sure you're alarmed. Everybody's alarmed. I recall seeing some response to this. I think that I saw written up that there were a list of things that their faculty was looking at, things they could do. And the one at the high school, there were 3 of them, and they all listed ACT. And I thought that's a pretty narrow thing to look at, especially when you consider this test's 10th grade. Has nothing to do, really, with 11th and 12th grade, as far as the scores are concerned. As far as overall school development, it certainly does, but so ACT scores to me would be kind of irrelevant to what we want to see happen here. We just started a new math program last year, and I know we have to give things a few years to develop. But I was looking through the student group performance level And I did see that we're in English language arts, we're holding steady from year to year fairly. But in math, we're going down since 2021. And there hasn't been an uptick from 21, 22 to 22, 23 in all groups. And that's concerning.
Pandemic issues?
Well, we're
post-pandemic. This is post-pandemic downward trend.
As
right?
much post-pandemic as you can be.
Right.
And we want to see these things take effect. And I'm concerned about the fact that there's this huge gap between our majority students, white students, and other targeted groups. And it has not lessened. And my feeling is if we're, as Barb was saying, are we teaching to the test? Unfortunately, it's a manifestation of our times that we have to have scores to be able to continue and do good things for the kids. And I'm sure there's wonderful things going on, but it's not translating into a score, which is not what, as teachers, what we're used to, what we think is good, but you got to have a score, unfortunately. The 51.8 is it's gone down by chunks, not by little.
It was a 6-point drop from the year before.
And that's huge. And the response that I know we need more time for a response, a really in-depth response. And I was thinking, and I mentioned this to Corey, other schools have not experienced this drop that we have in our comparable schools. So I think we need a really big response, a really considered response. It's going to take time. And you had mentioned about the content of courses, which is really hard to look at because you're really getting into the minutia of education. And as I think Dennis or somebody said, we want a general idea of what our response is. I think it should be a specific idea of what are we going to do to stop this. And I'm not the only one concerned. Everybody's concerned.
Correct.
And just as a follow-up, G, so the ACT stuff, the reason I reference that, and I'm glad you brought that up, is that also relates, so they take that in 11th, but also then in 10th they take the pre-ACT. So those two in this prep work, the ability to leverage, to methodize, to look at our class content and the level of rigor that we're giving students in there, that's why we identified that specific piece in there, is because that work extends all the way down to 9th grade even, because we do pre-ACT there, pre-ACT in 10th, and then ACT in 11th grade. That was one of the pieces we identified there, but I do think the piece you identified around that, the literacy work, we're doing that across, at all 3 sites. They're looking at supporting student literacy as part of their SLO, which is in their school, their continuous improvement plan at their buildings, and really making sure our teachers have the skills and the tools to be able to help students with that kind of work. Because all of these tests, even as a science teacher, the science test, it's still a reading test. Kids need to be able to read, and they need to be able to read and think like a scientist. So by providing those types of opportunities, it's really important to help them get ready for that.
Well, with the exception of Plover Whiting, it seems the rest of our schools are doing just fine. So I'm thinking that
They're all trending down.
No, I mean, we've
we
got
have
some
schools that exceed expectations.
Their rating
5%.
is okay, but their
Well, they
scores are slowly
exceed
going
expectations.
Right, like Washington, the drop from 76.4 to 69.6 concerns me.
Significant.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's more than what.
Okay, that's a
Concerns
good
me
point.
as well.
Can I ask you one thing, and I don't know if you can answer this or not. On the report, this was for the high school, there's one page, a student group value added. What is that? What is that? What does that mean? How is that figured?
They and you can add to it, Chris, but they take that value add score, that's the score that they run over the course of 3 years to get that value added score, G. So there's a baseline in the middle, and it'll identify to the left is going to add positive growth that we've seen when we look over that 3-year trend, and then if it's on the right side, it's going to be that downward trend that we're seeing.
Well, then it would make sense, these are all down, because we're all trending down.
Right.
Okay.
So I think the value add, G, is a significant contributor in the overall growth score for students and the overall growth score that's assigned by building and by district. So when you look at those demographic groups that are identified in that page of the detail, there's a summary report. It's showing that we have not experienced growth in either ELA or math for a number of those groups at the high school. And you're right, to use your word, that is alarming, right?
Well,
and that is a call to action.
Another part that concerns me is it seems that our students that are traditionally done well are still doing traditionally well. And when I look at target group outcomes, these are students that traditionally don't do well, and they're doing worse. And so when I see something like the ACT scores, like the 3 things that I alluded to before, that's not it. It's, we need, our kids up here are still up here, and they're still doing great. So these kids here, they need, and we need to focus, and you know it, we need to focus on them because they're slowly fading on us. Now, the new math program, I hope, is going to help that, and I think it deserves a couple more years of work for us, especially because it's at the secondary level, which I think we really, that's where SPASH, that number is focused. So when you say we need to see some ideas of what's going to happen, I think they should be specific, and we should have a time schedule on that so that we see them. I don't want to wait till the end of the year.
Right.
I know you're under time constraint. I don't know if
Even
it's fair
just
to ask for
preliminary
answers.
planning in terms of like, for the buildings with the steep drops, right? And those that are not performing, that are underperforming, can you bring back to the board just a preliminary, this is what we plan to do. We're not expecting data to shift, right? We just want to ensure.
Corey mentioned, this is a hard,
Yes.
this is going to be a hard thing,
Yep.
especially at the high school. We're looking at the content of the courses. These other high schools that are not, that have not, they're not scoring where we're scoring. And I know we have somebody on our staff, you mentioned to it when I talked to you before, that came from Rapids. That would be like a prime source of information. Can we access them cross-school district to find out?
Yes.
John is already working on that. He's already been in close communication with many of his colleagues in the region. But most definitely, we can bring additional information to the board. It is going to take time. We are concerned about it. The reason that Chris had mentioned mid-year or end of the year was because that's when we had additional data. I mean, we can bring to you the continuous improvement plans that they're working on, the specifics that they're going to implement as soon as possible, the professional development that's tied to that, everything. And we can continue to keep you updated. Peg?
So the other part, I think that that Alex's question kind of worked towards is really what is the rigor of the schedule that our students in high school are taking? And I'll date myself with my age because I haven't been in high school for a long time. But it's that, especially at those ages, the push shove of, does the student get to pick? Does the parent get to pick? What conversations are happening with our advisors? So, maybe there's some ability, because we are moving into signing up for classes in the very near future for maybe a look at some of that, and an encouragement both with our students, especially at the high school level, as well as with families, about the importance of class selection, and in the world today, I think sometimes people think, well, you don't need to learn math because we all have calculators, or we have computers, or maybe this isn't as important as that, but to be able to, as a district, provide, just that as well to our families, that we really want to encourage kids to reach in what they're signing up for in their class selection, and to challenge themselves with the amazing classes that we're providing, even to begin at least some of that now, to see if that encouragement is going to get some kids to start thinking about the importance of taking a class schedule with rigor.
And I think that's one of the great benefits of doing the program review we've been doing, and certainly the broad system of course offerings that we have available for students is an incredible benefit. But there are challenges that come with that, right? And some of those get at exactly what you were referencing, Meg. So when we have all of these courses available, are we creating so many opportunities that students aren't necessarily engaging in the level of rigor in those areas that we're being evaluated on? So we don't necessarily have to like the test, and the forward exam is hard. It's a really challenging assessment. We don't have to like it, but we do have to hold ourselves accountable to the outcomes that we get from it. So we do have to refine our systems to more intentionally embed that level of rigor. And, if that means at some point we are giving more directives to families around kind of narrowing that focus in course selection, I think that's a systems change that we could easily make relatively quickly.
Alex?
Looking at the SPASH one, once again specifically, looking at growth, we are, quote, the same or higher than 8.2% of schools in the state. And when it comes to target group outcomes, we are 3.5%.
Yep.
That's scary numbers.
Those are very scary numbers.
Very scary, concerning numbers. And to G's point, we need to see, and I've spoken to this already, specifics, not generalized. And I know you say we're doing deep dives, but this is more grave than a deep dive. We need paddles to the chest because we need to do something quickly or DPI is going to come, and we're not going to like that. We don't have that autonomy once they come in.
Agreed.
And at a 3.5% better and an 8.9% better, paddles would ER run. So I don't know necessarily we have the time to be like, we need to.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, and those plans that, continuous improvement plans, Corey said that we're implementing. I mean, those are currently being implemented, right? So there have been several very matter-of-fact and very sense of urgency grounded conversations that have happened with faculty at SPASH, and Jeff can certainly attest to that. He's been present for all of those conversations, and there is a different sense of urgency in that building in terms of how we're responding, because you're right, this can't happen again. If we experience a 3-point drop, we're not meeting any expectations, and no one in this room and no one in that building is okay with that. So I can assure you that there is a very different response to the scores that were provided for us this year than there has been in the past, and there is a sense of urgency.
You started the academic interventionist program at the elementary schools. Do we have one at the junior highs and the high school?
We have at-risk programming, and that's part of the program review that we're looking at. So we've dug a little bit into that, but we're continuing to look at that, and Jeff's gathering additional information.
So we don't have people like the elementary schools where they are specifically finding kids who kind of fall through the cracks and helping them? We don't have people.
We do, but it just looks different. Jeff, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we have, so right now at the secondary, there are stipend positions. So those teachers, they're teachers, they teach during the day, and we have them in math, writing, and ELA. So those teachers will review with Jackie Maybon. They dig into that data. They talk and identify student groups that need targeted supports, but we don't have an interventionist during the day outside of special education that can run interventions at the secondary level.
But there are courses that address students who are at risk.
Yeah, so like at our junior high, we have AIM that can be run. That's a course that students have to support them. We have Reader's Workshop that's available at the junior high level. SPASH has the TTS program that Corey alludes to. We have 3 staff members that are there to support students with that piece. And we also have reading programming that's available to all of our students outside of our obviously special ed programming as well.
Again, when we, as I commented a while back, as we're looking at needs in the future, it's one thing to have a SST or a group that identifies needs and talks about what the scholars need, but unless we have the actual position, the interventionist, the math interventionist, reading interventionist at the junior and senior high school, that's a big vacuum in our system, I would think, because my knowledge of other districts, when they have, they do have those specialists, and it doesn't seem like we have that to the same degree, so.
And we are working right now. One of the program reviews, so we have a math steering committee that meets. In our last one, we started talking about how might we need to look at like our AIM programming differently to better meet the needs of students and integrating within that an intervention opportunity for students. So we've got a couple of teachers that I've been talking to about potentially piloting an option like that, where you share groups of kids and then expertise of teachers is able to be used to provide that type of intervention.
And I know you would love those positions, and I'm just suggesting that as we're looking at resources available to our district and the need to gain more resources from the community, this is one of the reasons why. We have a number of scholars out there who really do need significant intervention beyond the classroom teacher, and we're not able to provide it at the same, we can identify them, but as far as the provision, I think we still have a ways to go, I would think.
Right, and I think one of the things that we've revealed as part of the program review and as part of developing continuous improvement plans that are very specific and intentional is identifying that even though we identify intervention programming that has demonstrated success with certain groups or individual students, we also recognize that it's not just good enough to make progress in an intervention at an instructional level that's already below peers. You have to make that progress and you have to make accelerated progress. So I think that's also a shift in thinking for our educators that are providing those interventions. So we're not just talking about making typical or expected progress, we're talking about making accelerated progress if we're going to really close that gap. So I think that is a bit of a shift in how we've been working traditionally.
Thank you guys for the work you're doing. We know that our teachers are also working tremendously hard, and this is not easy news to receive, right? If you are working hard and you're receiving this data, but we look forward to updates from you.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 14 under general, we have the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes, and I'm going to hand it off to Corey.
Sure. So you've been hearing for months information about our current budget situation. You've also been hearing about the potential need for a referendum. Last Monday, I shared a detailed report. I'll continue to provide the board with updates as things evolve, and we'll bring things forward to the board for approval as necessary. But tonight, what we're asking for is action on two resolutions. The first resolution is to exceed the revenue limit, and the second resolution is to actually put the referendum on the ballot. So you can see in your packet, both resolutions are included. One is short and sweet, and the other is quite lengthy there. I'm sure you've already taken some time to review those. They were shared last week as well, so you had a week to reach out if you had any questions or concerns. I didn't hear any. So with that, we just look to approve each motion individually.
I will make a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed the revenue limit by $8,750,000 for the 2024-2025 school year and by an additional $5,250,000 for a total of $14 million for the 2025-2026 school year and thereafter for recurring purposes.
Okay, motion made by Meg, second by Dennis. Questions or comments? Okay, with that, roll call vote, Carlin.
Ms. Erler,
Aye.
Mr. Robbie,
Aye.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Mr. Campos,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman.
Yes.
And motion carries.
Thank you. And we are looking for a motion to approve the resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit for recurring purposes.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Meg, second by Barb. Questions, comments? Okay, what roll call vote, Carlin?
Ms. Erler,
Aye.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Mr. Campos,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes.
and motion carries.
Thank you, Carlin. We'll move on to agenda item C, 2024 WASB resolutions.
Sure. So in your packet is the proposed 2024 WASB resolutions. These were advanced by the Policy and Resolutions Committee, which includes about 25 school board members from across the state. G is our delegate, and he will be voting in January at the convention. So what I'm asking is for you to review the attached resolutions. Cabinet is doing the same. Get any feedback or resolutions that you're not in favor of or have questions about to Carlin by January 2nd. And then at the January meeting, we'll have the board take action on how they want G to vote on the 17th at the convention. Any questions about that? This is the same process that we used last year.
Anybody is free to attend along with me.
I'm busy that.
You know,
What?
I'm busy that during that time.
G deserves a lot of credit. That is a thankless job. So G,
No, there's a lot fewer resolutions, and I don't know if they're gonna go through the ones that we didn't do last year,
yeah,
Oh my
but
gosh.
it was,
I don't believe
very
so. If
tedious.
it isn't on here,
Yeah, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't take
they'll,
that long,
they'll just
hopefully.
be doing these. Yeah, because last year they only got through about half the resolutions.
Isn't that crazy?
Didn't
And
they?
there were a
Before
lot.
people just left.
Right. That's right.
But I was
remember
surprised,
that.
people read these and
Yep.
parse them word by word.
yep, yep.
So there are people out there that are poring over these,
Mm-hmm.
and far more than I thought, so.
So anyway, let Carlin know by the 2nd, and then we'll take action in January.
Thanks for representing us, G.
Thank you, Jake.
Better you than us. Okay, so moving on to future meetings, dates, and times. We have our next school board meeting, January 8th, 2024. And then for committee meetings, due to the New Year's holiday, committee meetings will be held on Tuesday, January 2nd. And that's Ed Services at 5:30 and Business Services HR Committee at 6:30. So at this time, I'm looking for a motion to convene into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 1985, paren 1, paren C.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and roll call vote, please. Roll call.
Mr. Campos,
Yes.
Mr. Robbie,
Yes.
Mr. Summers,
Yes.
Ms. Portson,
Yes.
Mr. Kowalski,
Yes.
Ms. Erler,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Bushman,
Yes,
and motion carries.
thank you. Okay, do you want to take a?
Let's come back in 2 minutes.
Sheesh. 8 o'clock.
I know there's some people that want to.
Making up for time here.
I know there might be another event happening.
I want to, is the camera off?